So here comes the final session of today. Let's welcome our final speaker, Mr. Slava Solonitsyn, partner of Revental Ventures. The presentation topic is, how should startups embrace the trend of IoT and big data? Let's welcome Slava.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Slava from Revental Ventures. We're running a seed fund from Singapore, which specifically focuses on IoT hardware, robotics, what we call frontier tech. We have $25 million under management, pretty brand new. Most of our portfolio in the US, but we do invest in Asia as well. So I want to talk today about how startups, which were traditionally working on hardware, can actually embrace IoT, big data trends, and AI, artificial intelligence trends. And I'll give you some examples of very successful American companies. And I think for an event like that, it's very important to actually, for startups, to learn and see what's coming, right? So because today you have economy of, let's say, consumer electronics, and it's still happening in Asia a lot, but in the US, it's changing. So we are just very briefly, we'll be talking about things like connected home, IoT platforms, smart data, which are somewhere in the inflated expectation cycle, I would say, most of these things. So talking very briefly about IoT, the Internet of Things, right? So what happened in the recent 5 years is basically, I would say, IoT companies which were funded a few years ago, got some of them who are successful got very big rounds, venture capital rounds. And now if you look at the size of those rounds, they're increasing actually. So what it all means for startups is if you're working on IoT per se, let's say platforms, IoT platforms or security layers, it's already too late. So these are the startups that started like a few years ago, and they're pretty much already raised like they Series A, Series B, or they failed, right? So, but no worries. So we'll see some opportunities. So obviously IoT is spans across multiple sectors, including energy, healthcare, manufacturing, retail, surveillance, home, agriculture. And if you look at market development for IoT, actually this is like the orange bar is number of size of market in terms of value of those devices installed, right? That's increasing, it's still increasing. Despite some decline in funding and investment. So what got the most funding so far in startups? Companies which are working on IoT platforms. So these are the largely like companies that raise like hundreds of millions of dollars. Companies working on IoT networks and infrastructure, software models, security IoT, and we will be talking about hardware per se, like related to IoT, which is the middle sector here. So companies that got like, these are just examples, guys. A lot of companies that were funded continue raising big rounds. But for startups, I would say pretty much all of these platforms are already, all of these niches are dominated by some players, or they start being dominated. Like, I mean, just one example, end-to-end platforms like Ayla, which build a device management stack. There's a lot of cloud infrastructure. They raised like more than $100 million, right? So like, and these guys are building the infrastructure layer for the entire market, right? So for IoT device manufacturers, not only startups, but large guys as well. I would say this one, if you're working on some B2B like platform layers, it's very hard to find niche now. IoT platforms got like more than $1 billion of funding, all of these sectors within the platforms. And it's still going, but mostly again, like these are the companies that are late stage funding, so it's not Series A or seed funding anymore, it's large rounds. Very briefly, IoT networks like this what basically include like network providers, mesh networks, they also raise about $1 billion altogether, companies like Vinium. I think it's, in my personal opinion, it's also pretty late for smaller startups. And I would say you as a like startup doing some hardware today, you need to be aware of these companies and what they're working on, what kind of platforms they create, what kind of security stack available already, instead of creating or trying to create your own software layers or cloud layers yourself, right? So security as well got a lot of funding, more than $500 million. So I would say this is a problem which is still getting a lot of funding at seed stage, but a lot of large startups emerge. Very briefly about big data. Like we are talking right now separately, IoT, big data as a separate phenomenon, right? Big data is actually now it's a bit different. I would say it's in decline in terms of venture capital funding. It's getting lower. So last couple of years saw decrease in funding, significant decrease in funding. So I would say if you talk about big data as a startup, it's very hard to raise money now. Actually, if you just say, I'm working on big data software layer, it's getting more harder. Just because I'm talking about data on venture capital funding, right? And mostly these are US market, okay? But I mean, like as well, the same trend happening here. Rounds getting bigger, like companies are raising bigger rounds, but it's very hard to start big data startup today and get proper funding. I will very much like quickly go through all these segments. So there are people like mostly getting funding, like larger companies, big data stacks, operational processing, analytical processing, which are most of the money coming and going. Talking about AI, it's very different, right? AI now it's very right time for startups, right? So like this just artificial intelligence mentioning like search term, and you can see CB Insights clearly show that people are searching, people are like really thinking this is a big and growing trend right now. There are multiple things why it happens, like why people do AI, why it's time for startups. Obviously, one of the key things is this accuracy increase, which like an algorithm improvement and GPU improvement, which increase, like enable much higher accuracy, let's say for image quality or image accuracy, image recognition accuracy, or speech recognition. These are just like really very narrow fields, but they show why AI startups now, and not only startups, but people like Amazon Alexa, like getting so much traction. It's actually started gaining real customer adoption. It just started making sense, right? And in terms of sectors that startups are working in, where they're getting funded a lot, it's machine learning, deep learning stuff, apps. We're talking about consumer apps, right? So we're talking about new generation of like consumer apps which are working on machine learning, deep learning stuff. But it's not only this. Subset of this is actually coming to hardware. Subset of this is harnessed by hardware companies working with mobile apps, working with software empowered by AI, right? So like real stuff, machine learning empowered hardware. Same Alexa and a few other examples that we're talking about. Computer vision is one of other trends you can embrace as a hardware company, right? So it's just making so much sense, this current level of technology, to add computer vision to your, let's say, security camera, right? Robots as well. Robots benefits like consumer robotics start very early, but start picking up, again, largely because AI is getting more and more mature, like a specific area, application focus, AI, same computer vision, like that power this trend in consumer robotics. But again, we're early. Consumer robotics is still early. Now, like really, what we're here, pretty much everyone here is okay, mobile hardware. So that's Launchpad thesis, right? So I believe most of audience and you guys represent companies either working for startups, working on hardware, or larger manufacturers. So what I personally believe in, the next 10 years for hardware will be less about hardware. It will be more about software, AI, data, and IoT. I would say if you're just working on pure hardware, there are a bunch of companies here on the floor just doing like traditional consumer hardware. As a startup, not as established manufacturer, as a startup, I think you're better off not doing this. Like, you better close your business right now. Stop doing this. You won't raise money. Okay, you still be able to raise money in Asia now, but no longer in US. So basically, this is what happened in US. Like, last few years, because of crowdfunding, because of all these trends, people raise money. Consumer hardware raise money. But most of those that are very successful, most of those that manage to get to like hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, they're not traditional consumer hardware. They are embracing the new trend. Just to give you a few examples, companies like Ring, right? Largely successful company. They raise $200 million revenue. The revenue is, this is estimation, right? That's not official, but it's more than $100 million revenue. A lot of subscription, like 10% of revenue is actually coming from subscription, right? So the reason why it's so successful, because they embrace the trend of like IoT, which is basically connected device, video surveillance. They start working on the actual computer vision stuff, right? So to recognize who came to your door, which is still not announced, but they're working on this stuff. And also subscription is very important. And the only way you can get subscription, if there is an app, if there is cloud, if there is recurring revenue, is basically, is there is some way to engage your customer on daily basis other than just pure hardware. So if they just playing hardware here, there is no recurring revenue, there is no so much traction, and VCs are not interested. And again, like, people who are working on smart locks, like devices like that are not so connected, not so smart, there are some in China, for instance, and some traditional OEMs, manufacturers are working on their own products, right? But they're not so successful. They're not so successful, at least in the US, right? So these guys did crack the code. This new trend at the intersection of AI, data, and IoT. And now example. Companies like Peloton, so basically that's a home fitness device, super successful. There is more than $100 million. They even, like, proportion of revenue coming from subscription, even larger. And so they're basically taking people, like, instead of going to gym, you can train at home, and they provide like thousands of programs to do training at home. So that's, for many people, it's easy value proposition because you don't have time to go to gym, right? So, or things like that. And again, like, very successful subscription model. And the only way they were able to do that, because they have this software layer, they have a training programs, right? So here it's even more than just like software, IoT. It's actually coaching platform. So they create platform for coaches and for individual content creators, right? Another example, obviously Alexa. Okay, this is not startup, but they're super successful as well, right? Amazon Echo sales, surprisingly, when they launched like 2 years ago, nobody expected, but they cracked the code. They also had like already sold about 8 million almost of devices for 2 years, right? That's a lot. That's a lot. And again, like, the reason why it's so successful, because they actually serve real thing. I mean, like, they get you connected to the apps you know. They want to like build a platform that allow you to basically deliver the content or deliver experience without using mobile phone, right? So without using smartphone. But even more, which is what they are not really talking about right now, but they also go into smart home. They want to be interfaced to like really to deal with smart home devices, right? That's even bigger vision. And again, this is only possible today with current speech recognition level, with current like software and IoT platforms established, super successful. Like simple companies, like much simpler product, Tile. Again, they have subscription model, which is if you know Tile, they have loss tracking device basically, right? So they subscription model works on the crowd sourcing of like lost item, right? So if you lost the item, people who use other tiles, they can help you find the item. So basically, that's slightly different, but it's still about platform, software layer. It's about community and about like having this smartness, about being able to detect lost items and let other people to help you actually to basically use their devices, use their mobile devices to find lost item. They're very successful in terms of revenue. They're actually growing again surprisingly. When I first saw them, I thought like, that's probably niche idea, right? But people buy them, people like them, right? So more simple ideas again, like baby wearables, which basically all it does like safety control, like for kids, like for babies. They sold, again, this is unofficial, like more than 20 million bucks last year. 60,000 devices. Again, subscription model. So these are the companies that are getting a lot of traction in Silicon Valley, in the US right now. That's not the same for Asia, actually. In Asia, traditional consumer hardware startups still raising money. But my expectation in the next couple of years, it will change. So if you work on like early stage idea right now, on startup idea, new consumer hardware device, coolest consumer hardware device, you like really need to think how you can embrace this trend, right? Some of the examples from our portfolio, 8 Sleep, they collect data. It's a mattress cover which basically track how you sleep and provide you daily advice how to improve your sleep. Pretty successful as well. They raised more than $10 million already. Naked Labs is another example. It's a 3D scanner to scan your body in the bedroom, and they also want to provide you instant feedback to your fitness program to see how your body is changing, how your muscles are shaping. I can't disclose the data there, but they also had very successful pre-order campaign. And again, it's platform because they create data. They collect data of your body, which they later can provide to someone else, like people who are working on custom fit clothing, right? They own data of your 3D body. With your permission, they can, let's say, go to models like C2M, right? Consumer to manufacturer. They can let you buy custom fit clothing in future, right? Because they know exactly what your body parameters, right? That's also platform vision. Or companies like Timular, which is basically a small device that allow you to track your time, right? So that's SaaS, that's guys SaaS. I mean, like when I first saw them, I thought it's hardware. No, it's just SaaS. It's just SaaS plus hardware, which only comes as software, a subscription model. You track your time, they integrate with time management systems. For people who track their time, that's ideal gadget, right? But it doesn't make sense if it is not integrated with other software, time management, project management software. It's like 80% software and 20% hardware. Or like cycling data collection, right? So for instance, Shocker Bell. So it's a summary, basically. So what we believe in as Ruventa Ventures, and we actually have very hard times finding such companies in Asia because I believe people just don't really yet understand this trend, right? So it's okay to do consumer hardware. It's great. But think of how you can build this as IoT device, as big data, data-enabled device, right? How you can embrace things like AI, speech recognition, doesn't have to create, you don't have to create it from scratch. You just can use existing platforms, right? But provide this device so that it can provide like real value on daily basis, right? Every day people will use your device, will interact with your mobile app, or through voice interface, through Alexa, same Alexa. The second thing, it's really about subscription model. VCs want to see recurring revenue coming from same customer for some reason. It should not be artificial, like when you say, okay, I actually think of a subscription model which will be like, I will sell or upsell some small accessories or do this and that. So all of these companies I mentioned, they subscription model related to software, related to platform, which makes sense. The hardware without the software platform doesn't make sense at all, right? So they embed this software layer, this smartness, into the very basics of the product, right? So the product without subscription model just simply doesn't work, or works in very like limited way, right? That's why like they have like 90%, 80% of customers actually using subscription model and getting additional content or getting additional value, right? So we believe it's definitely much larger opportunity if you start like embracing these trends. For you as a startup, you will be able to raise more money quicker, both in Asia and US. And please don't create things like cloud systems for your IoT device from scratch. Use existing systems. Just to give you an example, like Ayla, for instance, right? These guys can let you create your device, like they have like cloud stack, device connectivity stack, like firmware which sit on your device, which actually allow seamless connectivity through multiple wireless routers, right? So you don't have to worry about testing your device with each single router and things like that. They have mobile app even, like template for mobile app. Even if you don't have mobile developers in your team, you can just use the templates, and that's so much easier. But the moment you created this, even if it is just first version of your IoT device, you already save like months and months of development time, right? And you already connected company, right? Or security, cybersecurity for IoT is a huge thing now. Don't try to do it yourself as a small startup, right? Just go to existing companies. And again, these are not portfolio companies, it's not promotion. There are multiple of them. But some companies like really working, actually I don't mention, Affero is one of them, but there are a bunch of them. But basically, companies that working on cybersecurity stack, right? On making sure your devices are secure, right? And you know this famous story about those surveillance cameras hacked, right? So in US, most of them were produced by OEMs, Chinese OEMs. Zero security protection. Like, you don't want to be as a startup having like been such news, right? So when your device is hacked, right? So final summary, just make sure you use existing platforms, save your time, increase your, expedite your go-to-market, just launch your product as soon as you can, but think strategically how you can build this as IoT data-enabled device. And have a roadmap. Maybe don't do everything from upfront, right? So have a roadmap, what you do in the first version. Build a system so that you can upgrade it over the air, so you can upgrade your firmware over the air, so you can add more and more features over time. And if you can think of adding AI, just this prefix AI in your startup pitch deck will let your life so much easier now, because I mean, you'll guys be treated as AI startup, right? So it will be easy for you to raise money. If it makes sense to use machine learning or deep learning, let's say, to process some of the data you collect, to provide some advanced features or something like that, or like, for instance, computer vision, right? So for anything camera related, if it makes sense to use like AI to process video, to do something, maybe to provide instant feedback on what is happening in your home and stuff like that. Yeah, so that makes your life also much easier. So if you're already doing this, please come to me and we will talk about business. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Slava. Any questions?
Hi, Slava. So our venture, well, we're 1 year old, and it's about preventative healthcare for animals, and based on machine learning. And so our challenge right now is, as for machine learning, you need a lot of data. But as startup, we don't have enough data set to do the neural learning and also deep learning. So do you have any recommendations that if we do want to go down this route, and
Sure.
yeah, so is there anything we can do for the startup
Sure.
stage?
Yeah, so obviously to get data, like ideally two ways, right? So either you subsidize the device or sell it at cost, let's say using platforms like Indiegogo, Kickstarter, pre-orders. Just try to sell 1,000 devices, like 2,000 devices, beta units, at the very low cost you can afford. Like as a startup, you want to at least cover your manufacturing costs, right? And then you can start collecting data, right? After this, you can reiterate and launch like proper retail version. Just don't call it like a final call it beta unit, call it like first unit, but don't bring the product too early, right? So if you're really sure you need to collect the data first, improve your algo, focus on your niche beachhead market, those evangelists that want to spend some money and help you co-develop the product, right? This is one. And this is what like all crowdfunding platforms were actually created for. They now use a lot as an e-commerce platform, but they are not, right? So originally they were more like co-creators, co-development platforms for people who really want to add value to your device or to your project, basically. The second advice is just find places where you can put this device for testing, like a lot of testing, like dog houses, like stuff like that. Just find ways to really get data as much as possible, as fast as possible, and be in stealth mode as much as possible, at least before you're ready to launch. Actually, the second route may be even better because you're still being low radar, under radar, and you can iterate much faster. Sorry, I don't hear.
Recommend the platform TensorFlow by Google. They just opened a new platform for machine learning.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay. Thank you, Slava. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks. Okay.